Picture this. It's 1513, centuries before satellites exist, and you're holding a map drawn on gazelle skin by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. At first, it seems like any medieval chart. Rough coastlines, notes scribbled in the margins. But then you spot something impossible at the bottom of the parchment. Antarctica, and not just a vague outline either. This map shows Antarctica in stunning detail, without the miles of ice covering it today. Here's the problem. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, 300 years later. Nobody could see what lay beneath that ice until the 20th century when we had radar and satellites. So how did a 16th century mapmaker get it? Right? Geologists say Antarctica's coast hasn't been ice-free for at least 6,000 years. That's before Mesopotamia, before Egypt, in a time we have zero written records from. Yet there it is, drawn with the kind of confidence that suggests someone actually saw it. Which raises the obvious question: how did Piri Reis know? Around the world, hidden in old libraries and dusty archives, there are maps that shouldn't exist. Maps drawn long before global exploration was possible, showing continents that aren't there anymore and islands nobody can find today. To the casual observer, they look like simple navigation charts. But study them closely and you hit a wall. Either these ancient cartographers were impossibly advanced, or they were documenting a world that once existed but doesn't anymore. One strange map might be a fluke, but when you've got dozens from different time periods and different cultures, that's a pattern. From the 16th to 19th centuries, phantom islands like Hy-Brasil and Frisland showed up repeatedly on maps. You also see continents that look suspiciously like Antarctica without its ice cap. The consistency is unsettling. Could Arab, Chinese, European, and Ottoman cartographers all independently make the same mistakes? Or were they working from fragments of the same lost source material? This evidence spans cultures that had no contact with each other, yet their maps fit together like puzzle pieces scattered across time. That points to one of two disturbing conclusions. Either our past is way more complicated than we're comfortable admitting, or we're missing something fundamental about how these maps came to be. What if these map makers were copying from records left behind by civilizations we don't remember? When scholars in Istanbul discovered the Piri Reis map in 1929, it initially seemed ordinary enough. Ottoman script detailed coastlines, standard nautical symbols. But closer inspection revealed something deeply strange. This 1513 map showed Europe, Africa, and South America, but also a massive southern landmass that looked remarkably like Antarctica. What makes this even weirder is that Piri Reis wasn't guessing. He wrote that he compiled his map from much older charts, some dating back to before Alexander the Great. If that's true, he was copying knowledge that shouldn't have existed in his world. The map doesn't just show Antarctica as a frozen wasteland either. It appears to show the continent's actual coastline, beneath the ice, matching what modern surveys have revealed. The last time Antarctica was ice-free? Thousands of years ago, long before recorded history. Some dismiss it as coincidence. Others claim the landmass is misidentified. But the details, the shape, the placement, they're too precise to wave away. If Piri Reis built his map from older sources like most cartographers did, then someone before him had already charted Antarctica. So who made the original maps? Piri Reis claimed he relied on charts far older than his time. If he's telling the truth, those older maps were made by a civilization capable of traveling, surveying, and recording a world we thought was prehistoric. The Piri Reis map forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. We might have no idea who the true first explorers of Earth actually were. Then there are the Phantom Islands. These are lands that appeared on maps for centuries, then vanished. Take Hy-Brasil, positioned just west of Ireland. Sailors described it as a place shrouded in mist that supposedly rose from the sea once every 7 years. Cartographers drew it with total confidence, marking its outline repeatedly from the 14th to 17th centuries. Frisland appeared on dozens of maps in the North Atlantic, sometimes drawn larger than Ireland itself. And there's Antillia, a sprawling island placed in the Atlantic before Columbus ever set sail. These islands, and many others, were carefully mapped, named, and recorded as real places. Yet they don't exist on modern maps. Why? The standard explanation weighs two possibilities. Either these were solid eyewitness accounts, or they were complete illusions. What makes Phantom Islands so fascinating isn't just that they were drawn, but how they were reported. Sailors swore they saw land where none exists today. Some even claimed to set foot on Hy-Brasil and returned with tales of strange animals and advanced inhabitants. These accounts convinced mapmakers who copied what they believed were verified discoveries. But when explorers later tried to find these locations, they'd vanished without a trace. In 1683, Admiral William Cowley reported seeing an island off the coast of South America, Pepys Island. In 1908, explorer Frederick Cook claimed to discover Bradley, a snow-covered landmass north of Crocker Land. These are all eyewitness accounts from sailors and explorers. And eyewitness accounts are tricky, depending on how vividly they're told and whose. Telling them, it's not surprising these islands ended up on maps. But modern technology, these Phantom Islands are nowhere to be found. Some call them mirages, optical illusions created by light playing tricks on the ocean's surface. Others suggest volcanic activity briefly thrust islands above water, only to swallow them again. But beneath those explanations, there's a stranger theory floating around. Maybe these maps recorded temporary windows into parallel realities, meaning Hy-Brasil, Frisland, and Antillia do exist, just not in this version of Earth. Sailors, in their long voyages, may have stumbled into a world adjacent to our own. The Phantom Islands don't stop at Piri Reis. During China's Ming Dynasty, from the 14th to 17th centuries, naval operations produced sea charts that included islands we can't find today. These weren't decorative maps. They were functional navigation guides for massive fleets, showing Pacific features that modern atlases insist don't exist. Some appear near Micronesia, others farther east, stretching into waters modern geography labels as empty. Yet these charts were real, working documents. If sailors relied on them, they believed those lands were real. Either the Pacific once held islands that have since disappeared, or cartographers were recording something history has chosen to forget. And it's not just the maps that don't match our reality. Across Polynesia and Asia, myths tell of sunken homelands and vanished islands. Polynesians spoke of Hawaii, a place of origin now beneath the waves. Japanese legends recall missing lands beyond their eastern horizon. The Philippines tells stories of great territories swallowed by the sea. These myths align perfectly with the vanished islands in Chinese maps. Were these just stories to explain natural disasters? Or was there something more? In 1926, British writer James Churchward dropped a bombshell. He published a 3-part series declaring that humanity's oldest and greatest homeland was neither Mesopotamia, Egypt, nor even Atlantis. It was a continent called Mu. Churchward didn't present Mu as myth. He claimed to have discovered its story decades earlier while serving as a soldier in India, when a temple priest showed him a collection of sun-baked tablets covered in strange writing in a dead script called Naga-Maya. Unable to resist the mystery, Churchward struck a deal with the priest. Teach him the language, and he'd preserve the relics. When he finally understood it, what he read shook him. The tablet spoke of the first land where humanity appeared, Mu, a continent that flourished tens of thousands of years ago before vanishing beneath the Pacific Ocean. Churchward described Mu as a dazzling, advanced society. He called its people the Nakal, saying they were superior in intellect and culture, in many respects greater than our own civilization. According to him, Mu stretched across the Pacific, larger than South America, running east to west from the Marianas to Easter Island, and north to south from Hawaii to Mangaia. This wasn't some sparse island chain. Mu was thriving, with over 64 million inhabitants divided into 10 tribes, but united, under one government and one religion. The civilization had 7 great cities, plus colonies reaching into other parts of the world. Here's where it gets interesting. European cartographers filled Pacific maps with phantom islands and lands that no longer exist. What if, in copying from older maps, they unknowingly drew the geography the Mu civilization once inhabited? The big question isn't just where Mu was, but what happened to it. According to Churchward, Mu suddenly disappeared around 12,000 years ago. The tablets revealed that Mu was swallowed by the earth in a bout of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. In a single night, the land buckled, cracked apart, and fell into the great abyss of fire. 50 million square miles of ocean rushed in to bury what remained. An entire civilization, 64 million people, cities, knowledge obliterated. Instantly, skeptics scoffed. Where the tablets? Why did no mainstream institution ever see them? Wasn't it too convenient that such a dramatic story depended on one man's testimony? But then strange artifacts began to surface. In 1921, mineralogist William Niven made an astonishing discovery in Mexico. He found over 100 stone tablets inscribed with mysterious writing. To most, the script was unreadable, but to Churchward it looked familiar. He insisted the symbols resembled the same Naga-Maya language he'd learned in India. Were these tablets also messages from the same lost civilization? The traces didn't end there. Beneath Pacific waters, divers began reporting unusual formations, blocks and walls that looked more like architecture than geology. Easter Island lies exactly on the boundary Churchward gave for Mu. Its iconic Moai statues have long been linked by some researchers to a lost mother culture. Ancient Pacific maps show vast land masses in this region that modern charts no longer record. Could those cartographers have been sketching the fading shadow of Mu? Why do medieval and early modern maps consistently show massive lands in the Pacific that simply aren't there today? Some explorers swore they saw them. Others insisted they landed on them. But over time, the islands disappeared from official cartography. When we place Churchward's Mu against these phantom maps, the overlap is unsettling. Mainstream historians dismiss Mu as fantasy, a hoax born from one man's obsession. They argue no geological evidence supports a continent vanishing under the Pacific in the last 12,000 years. But if historians are right, why did William Niven's tablets hold the same script? And why do maps across centuries stubbornly show Pacific continents that geologists deny? The enigma doesn't end with Mu. In ancient Greece, Plato did something unexpected in 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. He told a story about a lost land called Atlantis, describing it as greater than Libya and Asia combined, positioned just beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato gave exact dimensions and described how Atlantis connected to other nearby islands, painting a picture of a civilization so advanced in knowledge and engineering that it once ruled parts of Europe and North Africa, and then it disappeared without a trace. According to Plato, Atlantis collapsed 9,000 years before his time in a cataclysmic flood. Scholars split into 2 camps. Some argued Plato was teaching through allegory, using Atlantis as a warning against arrogance. Others countered by asking why he described real places like Libya and Egypt in such detail, only to anchor them to a made-up land. If Atlantis was fantasy, why weave it so tightly into Earth's geography? Later maps show vast islands in the Atlantic that modern charts no longer recognize. Some cartographers marked lands west of Africa and Europe that looked suspiciously like Plato's Atlantis. Were early map makers simply misled by sailors? Or were they working from ancient source maps holding traces of Atlantean geography? But there's another possibility for these phantom lands. What if they existed but were destroyed through crustal displacement? In the mid-20th century, Professor Charles Hapgood proposed that Earth's crust doesn't always sit still. It can slip over the softer mantle beneath, dragging continents into new positions. In thousands or even hundreds of years, coastlines could vanish, climates could flip, and entire land masses could drown or freeze. Connect this to ancient maps. If Hapgood was right, maybe Antarctica sat in warmer waters when it was mapped before a pole. Shift buried it under ice. This doesn't mean lost continents are real, but it suggests ancient cartographers might have been, recording a very different Earth from the one we know today. So why are these anomalies brushed aside so quickly? Part of it is caution. Science thrives on evidence, not speculation. But there's something cultural at play too. If we admit these ancient maps are accurate, we're also admitting that civilizations, thousands of years before us, had knowledge we can't explain. That forces us to do something uncomfortable, rewrite history, rethink what humans were capable of, and face the possibility that we weren't the first to map Earth in astonishing detail. That kind of idea shakes things up. It rattles the foundations of archaeology, geology, and the entire story we've been taught about human progress. So it becomes easier to wave the anomalies away, call them errors or curiosities, place them in the dusty corner of a museum, and move on. That way the official story stays intact. But here's the thing. Every time we dismiss these maps, we might